Thank you for tuning in. This is the Tuesday Counseling Podcast. And I'm back with my beautiful, wonderful friends, Avery and Aaron, as always. Guys, we are halfway through season 1. Actually, over halfway now.
It went by so fast.
I know we've made a lot of progress. For transparency, we're looking at just kind of rounding out a season probably in the next few episodes and taking a regroup, getting new guests organized, getting new topics organized. But we've got some really cool things in the works with future guests and future topics. But today, I think we are going to go into an ever popular subject of self-care as therapists, what we recommend to clients. That is definitely a loaded subject. I guess, how do you guys feel about that topic, just offhand?
I have complicated feelings with self-care, I think, just because I feel like it's really kind of taken over like the wellness industry in a way, to the point where like self-care is super commercialized now. And so a lot of the conversations that I have with my clients, I feel like centers around self-care shouldn't have to be expensive. It shouldn't have to be, something that you like have to book or, block off all this time for. It can really just be like very, very simple things throughout your day that don't cost anything. I think when you find what works for you, it works. I think it's hard also with everything like self-care becoming super popular and super commercialized. Like there's this idea that like, okay, well, if like taking a bath and reading a book doesn't work for me, then like what does? Kind of like one size fits all a little bit for self-care, which I mean, I feel like there are some things that are home runs, but I feel like it is really, really unique to the person and you have to figure out what works for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also think that over time, self-care changes depending on what capacity you have to care for yourself. And I think that's the hard part, right? When people's plates are completely full, self-care isn't going to help because they're already so overwhelmed. And so sometimes self-care can look like taking things off your plate. And so kind of changing the idea of what self-care means for each person. Something I talk about a lot is micro forms of self-care, because self-care can feel overwhelming, right? Like we don't all have time to take a bath every night or go on a walk every day, right? Like that's just not realistic. And so finding like, okay, what do I have time for? And can I be mindful to do something for myself? And that could look like having my favorite soda at the end of the night or like a glass of water. Like it can be small, feeding ourselves 3 meals a day, what things that work for you, but redefining versus what people assume self-care means.
Yeah. I think sometimes I will reframe it and say, replacing self-care with self-comfort. If my clients or whoever it is, like just really have a lot on their plate. I think instead of asking the question, like, what should I do to take care of myself right now? Like, what would make me feel like safe? What would make me feel cozy and comfy? And sometimes I feel like that question can get you a better answer about what self-care might look like, because it doesn't have to be like this grandiose act that takes all this effort, that almost like takes the point of self-care out of self-care. Is if it's something that requires, this massive effort to get done, then,
it's an added stressor.
Right. Yeah. So sometimes I think self-comfort instead of self-care.
I think that's a cool kind of distinction to make. I think just like offhand, I notice kind of mixed feelings as we're talking about. I absolutely recognize that self-care is so important. I also think it's become so, I don't know, like very ubiquitous in like the social kind of like discourse around mental health of like it's almost become somehow like overused to me, or it just feels a little bit like we've done it to death somehow. I think that there's kind of a movement towards trends when it comes to mental health. I feel like that was a big one of like, oh my God, this is my version of self care. You need to find your version of self care, which, like, fundamentally, I agree with. I do think that as a pendulum kind of swings towards a trend, it naturally kind of goes away too.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we might be in a moment where now that's sort of not falling out of trend, but it's kind of just like, like I kind of know what works for me, or I don't know what works for me, and I'm like working to figure it out. But I think it's one of those things that I just noticed being like, ugh, like, and not that I'm not excited to talk about it. I think that's actually an interesting kind of element to bring into the conversation. I guess, how does that grab you guys? Does that sound fair? Does that sound like I have stuff I need to work on maybe within my relationship to self-care?
Well, I think I have a complicated relationship with self-care too. Um, and so, I mean, I think it sounds fair to me, but maybe that's because I kind of feel the same way you do. I don't know.
Maybe tell me if this is what you're experiencing, but that's something that I've already thought of, right? So when people recommend it,
Yeah.
it's almost like an eye roll of like, yeah,
Yeah.
I've heard that. Everyone talks about it. And if I had the
Yeah.
time and space and energy to do that, sure, I would. That sounds lovely. But I think maybe the frustrating part for people is that they don't have the time, the space, the energy to invest in self
Yeah.
care. And so it can be,
Yeah.
Well,
I
and I
think that
think
is what I'm saying, Avery. Yeah.
yeah.
when
Sorry.
I think about like social media and the way that self-care has kind of been portrayed in the media, I think about like your classic like influencer day in my life of like I'm gonna make my coffee with my $500 espresso machine, and I'm gonna put my eye masks on, and just like think I feel like it's been glamorized in a way that makes it feel unattainable to people. I think
Mm-hmm.
there's almost like an underlying question of like, okay, has self-care become like a privilege
Mm.
to have, and to be able to invest in, because that is kind of a random question and a random judgment call I've made based on like I feel like what I see in social media,
Yeah.
and so I'm not surprised that like it got super popular and then went away, because a bunch of people were like, it's really expensive to keep up with this and it's really hard,
Yeah.
and if you have the money, I think self-care is really easy to engage in. And so I think the more beneficial conversation to be having would be, you know, how can we practice self-care when self-care feels hard? Or how can we practice self-care when
Mhm.
we don't have limitless resources um,
Yeah.
available to us?
Yeah. Yeah. I think definitely what I've found is like finding your own definition of it, finding the version of it that's like attainable, um, almost like within your means. Because I feel like that's also what you're saying, Erin, of like, okay, I love that for you, that you can like go get your nails done or go get a massage or do all that stuff. And that is self care too, for sure. But like, what if I don't have an extra $500 in my budget to go
Right.
towards self care every month, kind of thing? Um, One thing that I am really big on, I remember in grad school, like, you have to do like the mock sessions with people. And I remember having a whole session, like with my client, quote unquote, about like self care. And I think we've all had sessions like that of just like, how are you taking care of yourself? This is a really busy time, all that stuff. But I remember kind of breaking the types of self care down. I think Erin has kind of done this in her own like resource building, but kind of breaking it down of like social self care versus physical self care versus spiritual self care, like kind of the different buckets almost that they could fall into.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I guess like thinking about it that way, is that a way that you guys kind of conceptualize it? Or is that not really your go-to?
I don't know. I think it depends. Like, I
Mhm.
feel like my first question when my clients have a lot on their plate is like, how are you eating? How are you sleeping?
Mm.
Um, but I think doing something like a self-care assessment that breaks it down into different kind of areas of self-care is helpful because you can recognize and celebrate the areas where you are taking good care of yourself that maybe you didn't realize you were doing.
Yeah.
And then also you can get super granular about like, okay, what areas of my life need a little bit more love?
Mhm.
And I think that makes it a lot easier to tackle than just kind of this ambiguous idea of just like taking care of myself.
Yeah.
And Erin, the resource that you have, I've used in the past more of people when they come in. I think sometimes people can feel shame about not engaging in self care, right? Of like when someone asks you, and I haven't used it at all, but I think when I first started out, people would say, like, well, I don't do anything for myself. Like, I have no time, I have no energy. And to do the self care assessment, I would say, I bet you can find one thing on here that you do or that you have done
Mhm.
in the past, and to be more mindful of thinking of it as self-care versus some of the things that are self-care we do in our daily life. So I think sometimes that resource can take the shame out of it of, wait a minute, I do care for myself in the ways that I have the energy, the ability to do right now, and that can be okay.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, and for those of y'all that don't know, which is probably most of you, like Erin has made a really, really cool, I don't know, it's a self-care assessment that she like built from scratch and it's
No, it's
designed.
not. It's not
Okay,
built
why
from
don't you tell
scratch.
us? Why don't you tell us?
It's well, I'm just like I don't want to take credit for something that isn't mine. Um, it was a resource that I found. I really just like to like make my resources cute and fun for my clients. I don't know why. Like sometimes I don't know. It was just like a black and white kind of like self care assessment. You probably could Google self care assessment and you would find it. Um, but I just made it pretty.
And it is. And it is so pretty. I guess tell us like can you break it down for us of like what's in it, like what it consists of?
Yeah. Um,
Because I think ideally I'd in the show notes maybe I'll kind of link it if you're a client or if you are a therapist who wants to use it with clients. I found it really, really helpful.
yeah. So there's it's from like a workbook on trauma, I think.
Mhm.
Avery, I actually might have stolen it from you.
Well, I
Um,
think in grad school, one of our professors gave it to us.
Oh, I don't
Yeah.
remember that now. Okay. I really thought Erin designed this from scratch. I've been telling people that for a long time.
no, I would love to take credit for that. That would be super
Okay.
fun. I mean, there are things that like I've adapted from it. There's one that I use for my disordered eating clients. That's a little bit different because um, there are things around like food and exercise that, you know, you may want to cut out or reframe in a different way for those types of
Mhm.
clients. But overall, it's pretty much I think what Avery got or what y'all got. But um, it breaks it up into physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, relational, workplace, and then it gives you like options to add in some. But like the
Mhm.
things that we think about with like physical self care of like eating regularly, um, going to the doctor,
Mhm.
taking time off when you're sick, um, sleeping, wearing clothes that I like. So just like things that you kind of do on a daily basis. And I think the key is you don't have to be doing it well, right? Like there's not a right way to do these things. It's just the fact that you are engaging in it in some way, shape, or form. Um, that's important. And so I think that's another thing with self care is like you go through an assessment like this and you're like, well, I I eat regularly, like, but I don't know if like I'm eating healthy. It's
Mhm.
like, okay, well, you're eating, like you're fueling your body. Um, and that is more important than, choosing not to fuel your body at all because what you're eating isn't healthy, quote unquote. So I think that's a big thing too, is like, you don't have to be doing it perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of reducing the shame where you can. Yeah. I think that's really cool. And I think that sometimes to kind of itemize stuff like that, kind of like what you're saying too, Avery, like, oh, I am going to the doctor, or like, oh, right, I am, doing like these really basic things. I didn't even realize that was self care kind of a thing. I feel like that can be really helpful to kind of get a feel for how your self care is already looking. I guess like when it comes to you both like personally, or you both as therapists, like how do you cheesy question, like how do you take care of yourself? I'm already like cringing because that's like so annoying to ask, I think.
I think it changes, right? Like day to day, what do I have the capacity for? I mean, ideally, I would
Mhm.
love to have like a routine and work out every morning and drink water before I drink
Mhm.
coffee and have a smoothie. Like, I would love to do all of those things. And I think on the days that I do have the capacity to do that, I notice that I do feel more cared for.
Yeah.
But that's just not realistic. And so I try to be mindful, like in the morning time, of like, okay, what do I have the energy for, the time for? And sometimes that means sleeping in an extra 30 minutes, or getting coffee on my way to work instead of having to make it, watching TV at night instead of maybe finishing the notes that I'm supposed to be doing, right? Like small
Mm.
things like that, but being intentional about it, I think that's what's helpful for me versus going through my whole day. And then I would recognize, well, I haven't done anything for myself today and I feel just
Yeah.
really burnt out. So I think throughout the day, checking in of like, what can I do? What do I have the time for? That's what's
Mhm.
helpful for me. But over time, it changes. I go through periods of time that different things feel more restful than others.
Yeah. I think that's probably pretty similar to how I would answer that question too, of like I think I definitely go through phases where maybe I have more time to invest in that, or whatever more resources to kind of throw toward that. I feel like in this moment I'm like, what am I doing? Um well, if I took that assessment right now, I'm like, okay, I'm doing the basic things for sure. Um One thing that I really like to do, and this is something that I talk actually a lot about with people, is when I feel kind of stuck with the self care, or just sort of like, I need something free, I need something easy, like kind of tapping into the spiritual self care aspect. And what I mean by that is not like going to church or going to temple or whatever it is, or praying or anything like that. I think when I say spiritual, and when I talk about this with clients, I don't mean spiritual as in religious. I mean spiritual as in connecting with something that is bigger than you. And so for someone else, and for me personally, that means like being in nature, or like drawing, like engaging with art or music. Like that feels bigger than myself. And that to me nourishes something for me spiritually. And I find so much value in that. So I'm like, yeah, maybe that's not the exact same as going to get a manicure, but that nourishes like some part of my body, mind, and soul. And so I find that useful. And I didn't have to spend money, and I didn't have to go to church or whatever it is. So I'd say like that's kind of my go to when I'm feeling a little bit lost. But yeah, I'd be curious, Erin, to know yours too.
Um, I in complete transparency, like have not been taking great care of myself recently. I think it's interesting, things that sometimes become self-care can also become things that like I mindlessly do, kind of in like a haze of dissociation. Like in times when like a TV show at the end of the day might be super self-care-ish for me,
Mm-hmm.
right now is kind of a trap. And like I stay up too late because I'm doing that, and it's kind of just a means for me to like check out and not check in with myself. Um, and so I think being mindful of that in and of itself, is helpful in taking care of myself. Um, you know, I try to get outside. I try to see the sun when the sun is available to me. Um, I love a good yoga class. That's pretty spiritual for me.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Like a candlelit yoga where it's like the flow isn't heavy necessarily, but the vibes are there. Yeah, I think like I have what I call an everything is fine outfit on deck, where like if I am just like having a really hard day, and even like picking out something to wear feels really hard, I have my everything is fine outfit, and I wear my everything is fine outfit, and it's great. And it's comfy, like it's a good like comfortable thing to have on my body, and I like the way that it feels, and I like the way that it looks, and so that's kind of like an easy slam dunk for me, is having that like ready to go.
I think that's cool. I've never heard of that. Just kind of taking the thought process out of it almost.
Yeah. There's a post on Substack that I love and I share with my clients all the time. And it's low energy habits that improve my mental health. And she talks about like, there's a time when I thought self-care had to be loud, morning alarms at 5 a.m., skincare routines with 12 steps, planners filled with color-coded tasks. And just talking about, how can you take care of yourself when in just like ways that doesn't kind of also mirror productivity in a way. And so, like choosing one thing a day, I will tell my clients a lot of times, like maybe today the laundry just goes, washer to dryer. Maybe today the laundry doesn't get folded. Maybe today is like a dishes day, and like kind of breaking your things up throughout the week to where it's like, okay, I know that I just have to get this one thing done today, and then I can spend the rest of the time, doing what I need to do, to chill out and take care of myself.
Yeah, I love that. Maybe we can meet in the show notes today. I'm like, maybe we can link that in the show notes too. Because I'm like, and someone might enjoy that. Like,
Yeah.
To go look at that resource too.
Well, I love it. And like, I think half of my caseload by now has this post.
Cool.
So
yeah, I would love to read that. I think, Erin, you're kind of reminding me too of like this idea that being like you're saying kind of like self-care not being equated to like productivity almost. It may kind of be the opposite even of like eliminating things off your to-do list because we just don't want to do them today kind of a thing. I don't know if this is even related, but in my head I'm like, there's so much value I think in letting yourself be bored, and that's something that I'm working on a lot more.
yeah.
I don't remember who I was talking to. I think I was talking to my neighbor about this. And he was telling me like, yeah, there was some book he recommended. I don't remember. I'll have to go look, but kind of the art of like letting yourself be bored. And in a culture, in a society that is so inundated with stimulus and things to do and people to talk to, like carving out time to actually let yourself engage with the feeling of boredom and why that benefits us sometimes.
Yeah.
The example that he gave me from that book was like, this is not something y'all are going to be interested in, but it's something I'm very interested in, which is bird watching. Because you have to sit there and you have to wait for a long ass time with your binoculars staring at a tree for a bird that may or may not show up. And if it does, yay, like dopamine, serotonin, like that feels so great. That's so exciting. If you're me, not if you're Avery or Aaron, maybe, but if you're me, that feels so exciting. And until a bird shows up, you're just sitting there and you're just staring at a tree. And I think that is something, it's almost a good practice to let yourself engage with the boredom of like, there's nothing for me to do right now except be bored, and that's okay.
Was the book Dopamine Nation?
I don't know. I feel like I had boredom in the title. I don't remember.
Okay.
What's that about?
Yeah, that was what I told myself when I graduated grad school, because obviously it takes a couple months or a month or however long for your license to come in. It ended up taking mine like
Mm.
around 2 months. And I told myself, this is the last time I will ever probably be this bored again. This is the last time that like I will really probably, not have a job, until I guess retire. And so I was trying to like let myself be okay with that. Just be
Yeah.
okay with like sitting in my room, like, okay, you literally have nothing to do. And that is okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of therapists experience that, especially like when you're building a caseload, whether that be when you are in, like when you first start out or you move to a new practice, like that period of time. I remember feeling really anxious. Like, how am I going to get all of these clients to be on my caseload? Like, what do I do with all of this free time? And on busy days, I think back and not regretfully, but wish that I had just enjoyed and known that everything was going to work out and that I was going to get where I needed to be. But those periods of times are really hard. But yes, to
Mm.
recognize like I can use this time. I don't have, and maybe I don't have to use this time for anything. Like I can use this time to rest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Avery, how did you know that's what I needed to hear?
Oh.
But that's literally where I am though. I'm like, I think every day, like I rack my brain of like, okay, what am I not doing marketing wise? Like, what am I not doing networking wise? Where are the gaps? And I think like, doesn't the research show that it takes like 18 or so months to get to a full caseload?
Yeah.
Um, and I have a solid caseload. Like I do. It's not as full as I would like it to be, but, it's definitely just like, I think the panic and the anxiety of like, what am I not doing?
Mm.
When really, good things and these things in particular take time. Um, so I really feel that hardcore right now of just
Yeah.
like, and hearing it from y'all with like full caseloads, I'm like, okay, maybe I'll, maybe I'll chill out. Because I know there will be a day when I wish that I just had like 15 people a week. And so,
Yeah. And sometimes, like, for maybe, I don't know if y'all experience this, like, some weeks feel really busy, and I'll be like, I have
Mm.
a super full caseload. And then it could be the next week, and I'll be like, I really need to take on new clients right now because there were
Yeah.
so many cancellations or people have graduated, right? And so I think that is the hard part is it never really ends. Like, there hasn't been a point that I've been like, okay, I mean, there's been like moments that I've been like, great, everything's good. I
Mhm.
don't need to do anything else. But then the next week that can change. And so trying to
Yeah.
manage the ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
yeah.
Totally. I mean, and I think too, I know that probably a really unique part of our line of work and probably self care that we could all stand to engage with more is sort of around like compassion fatigue. Oops,
She
not to
said
bring that one up.
it.
But I'm like, man, do you guys have days where you just get done with your sessions and you were not uncompassionate? Like you were fully present, you were fully locked in, fully engaged with your clients. And then it's like trying to talk to, in my case, like my partner after work. And he's like, how was your day? And I'm like, just
Yeah.
don't talk to me. Like, no more talking. Or like wanting to be there for people after work and just feeling so done. Just like my
Yeah.
my my reservoirs or whatever are like drained,
Mm-hmm.
reserves. I guess like is that something that you guys experience, or does that come in waves for y'all? Has that never happened to you?
I think I think a trap I also get caught into is, the heaviness of our work and like the heaviness of
Mhm.
what we carry around all day. And then, you know, my partner calls me on the way home from work and he's like, how was your day? And I'm like, you don't even want to know. Like, you do not want, and if I, and sometimes like some
Mm.
days are heavier than others. And then just, I also get caught in the trap sometimes of like, my friends and family and the people in my lives that have a 9 to 5, um, and comparing kind of like frustrations and comparing, um, the difficulty level, I guess, of jobs. Um, I get caught in that too. But yes, I certainly agree.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think the hard part is I haven't been able to pin when the compassion fatigue, right? Like what are the triggers for it? Because it could be
Yeah.
something like different. Like sometimes it's the amount of people I see, and some days I could see that many people, and then this one day it felt like too much. Or sometimes it's the topics, and sometimes it's not the topics. Sometimes it's how I feel like I showed up in the room. And so I think that's
Yeah.
what's hard for me is I can't predict at the beginning of my day if I'll feel that or not. And some days I'm like, oh, I'm going to be really tired by the end of the day. And I feel like I could come home and hear I could like see a million other clients. And then other times I come home and cannot hear one more thing.
Yeah. Yeah. What helps with that for you?
I don't know yet.
You're like, if you find out, let me know.
I would say something that if I have a really heavy day and I feel compassion fatigue, to close out my notes, which is something like, I'm going to be honest, I sometimes like wait a day or two to do them. But like to complete it before I leave the office, that's really helpful for me to say like, okay, I'm leaving this here. I've done what I can do, coming home, taking a shower, changing into pajamas, like making it very separate. That is helpful. It doesn't take it away, but I think just resting, watching a lighthearted show, maybe like a reality show, like sometimes that's helpful to bring some lightheartedness into the day. But I don't think I've found something that works every single time. I also don't know that there is something that works every single time.
Yeah. I don't know. I think maybe this is not a good thing to do, so maybe don't take this advice. But I'm like, I think I'm really, really good at just like, if my brain had an on and off switch, I could just go off and just like, I don't know if everyone else can do that, but oh, okay.
I really wish I could. That sounds
really-
so nice.
I am the worst compartmentalizer ever. You know,
Yeah.
like if you texted me 3 minutes before a session and were like, "Hey, can we talk later today?" I feel like I don't want to classify and say good therapists, or would be able to kind of like put that in a box and put it away. That's been my biggest thing. I also think with just like seeing clients at home too in telehealth, that's why the office has been so nice. It's kind of created that separation a little bit, because it's been hard. I think it's harder to separate it for me when I'm seeing clients in the same place that I'm sleeping and binge watching shows and doing all the things.
Yeah. See, and that's kind of why I am curious if this is maybe more of a maladaptive coping skill than anything else. My therapist this week was like, I told Erin and Avery this already over brunch, but she was like, do you think you maybe are like higher on the dissociation levels than you think? And I said, I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine, girl. Maybe. And the more I've kind of sat with that comment, I'm like, maybe that's kind of something that I do, or my brain does, to take care of me without realizing, is just being like, actually, no. Like, emergency brake, we can just turn off, which is arguably like kind of nice sometimes. Like, if I had a really long day, I can just not think about my day and go for a walk, or just like radio silence in my brain, which is so nice. So I don't know if I want to change that. I'm like, maybe I like dissociating, actually, Miss Girl. Maybe I don't want to change that. No, but I think definitely for me, like being able to have a physical change of scenery, like stepping out of my house, going for a walk. I hate to say journaling. I love, love, love journaling, just kind of like stream of consciousness type stuff, just like putting all of the things I'm thinking or feeling or noticing on paper. I really like to meditate too. So like, I hate that these are the things that are almost cliched, but they really do work for me, and they might work for you too. But yeah, I think it is just a very individual process. I think it's a lifelong process of finding what works for you, what meets your needs. Okay. Okay, cool.
Awesome.
All right, awesome. I don't think we have a question today. Which is fine. If you guys have questions, you know where to put them, in the link in my bio on whatever. And you can ask a question. We'll probably answer it. But today, I think we're maxed out on our questions. Other thoughts, guys, before we wrap this up for today?
I think so.
Okay. Well, we're wishing you, whoever's listening, a peaceful week, a restorative week, finding whatever self-care lands for you. Like I said, I'll put some of those resources in the notes and you can go check those out if you want. But we will be back here next week. What are we doing next week? Oh, next week we're talking like breakups, be it relationships, romantic or platonic, and grief and all of that fun stuff. So it'll be a juicy one. You don't want to miss it. All right. Well, we'll see you guys then. And take care. Goodbye.